So what do you want in the future? I want to have my own house, I want to have a decent life, I want to have some control over this. I said, okay. So Japanese people love predictability.
Right.
They want to know that what will happen.
Right.
There's no surprises. There's going to be really wonderful times and then really terrible times. And just if you manage your expectations and just do the best you can, it's good enough.
So happy. I've had you on this podcast more than anyone so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've enjoyed it too.
My pleasure.
Whenever I call you, you're ready to come.
Of course. That's what friends are for.
I love it. What have you been up to recently? Because we haven't seen much of each other. We haven't been writing for a while.
So I've been helping my daughter with her university applications.
Okay.
Because she's going to go to UK next year, or this year rather.
Right.
So I've been kind of helping her because, she's a 17-year-old and she doesn't really know what she wants to do. Mm-hmm. But we kind of force them to make a decision quite early. So I kind of sit down with her and emotionally she tells me what she wants to do. Then logically I'll tell her how to get there.
Okay.
So I said, so what do you want in the future? I want to have my own house, I want to have a decent life, I want to have some control over this. I said, okay, no problem. I said, so you have to kind of choose a career path that will help you do that. I said, so what do you like? I'm not really too sure. I said, okay, well, let's have a think about it. So she likes psychology, she likes kind of biology and chemistry and that kind of stuff. I said, okay, so let's have a look at a subject that kind of covers it all. So I did some research and then we found like a neuroscience. Cognitive neuroscience is basically half medical, half psychological, how the brain works and this kind of stuff. And it was very interesting for her. So we kind of...
Well, did you research this together?
Yeah. So basically, I first did some researching and looked at maybe like the top 10 universities in the UK and see what they offer.
Okay.
And then I kind of said, well, here are some courses, have a look at it, what do you think? Then she had a look and said, yeah, it looks kind of interesting. So then we kind of decided on like 5 potential universities in UK. So like St Andrews and Edinburgh and King's College London, Bath, these kinds of places. So all top 10 universities, right? Which is good. And she studies IB, so her IB will finish this year. And the predicted grades were good enough so that we could apply to all of them. So we have just got to wait and see. But she studies quite hard. So I've been doing a lot of that. That's been very, very important for me. Right. And then we go through in UK you have a thing called UCAS, which is like a national university system where you apply to universities through UCAS.
Right.
There's no SATs or anything. You look at A levels or IBs, and then you basically choose the universities and you submit like a personal statement about who you are and why you're interested. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different to America where you don't have to write essays. You just have one personal statement.
Right.
And then that's just basically circulated through UCAS to each of the universities.
Now, this personal statement is like what?
So basically it goes about like who you are, a little bit of a life history, why, for example, you're interested in neuroscience, what things have you done that relate to neuroscience, what things can you contribute to the course, these kind of things. So it's not an easy thing, but it's also limited on the number of words as well.
Of course, right.
So you kind of have to be a little bit... So in America, a lot more, for example, clubs and activities and things you've done, but in UK it doesn't matter.
In UK, want to know?
They don't really care. They just look. They basically look at what you're studying. They look.
What about your lineage?
Lineage, not so much. Like some of the universities in UK, it is relevant. Some
like
of
Eton.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get
Harrow,
in there.
Eton,
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of that comes through families, right?
Right. You're not going to get in there unless.
Not at all. And also in Oxford, some of the universities, some of the actual... Because Oxford University is actually many universities together. It's not just one, it's many. Right. And some of them are more medical related and some of them are more related to peerage, related to, the families.
The lineage, right?
Yeah, they're basically brought in. So that's not too much of a problem. St Andrews is where Prince William went to have his studying, so that's no problem. So, that's kind of the way it is. So in America, you do a lot more essays for each of the universities and you talk about all your activities, your basketball, your volleyball, but in UK, it doesn't matter. In UK, we have a thing called the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which is kind of encouraging kids to go out and go camping and be kind of independent and stuff like that. So she puts that in, and then she's part of the medical society and stuff like that. So we sent it all off, and that was all okay. But then the next thing in UK, which is really weird, is that the course fees, you have your local and your international. So UK is one of the only countries that doesn't matter of your nationality. It only matters your residency. So, for example, even though my daughter has a British passport, is a British citizen, she will still be seen as an international student because she hasn't lived in UK for 3 years concurrently. Maybe it's similar in America, I'm not too sure. Yes. But the differences are quite big. I mean, like, for example, in UK, every university is a national university. There's no private universities. So fees are basically set. £9,600 for 1 year. Right. And if you're an international student, £26,000 to £29,000. So it's about 3 times more. But it's okay. It is not so much of a big deal. So we're kind of petitioning some of the universities, you know, can you consider us as a local, you know, because I have a house in UK, because we have intention to return, But there's a lot less international students, so the universities are really trying to get more money. So they're a lot less flexible on allowing that. So we applied to a few universities, and a few of them have come back saying, no, it has to be international. It's okay, it's no problem. And that's kind of what we've been doing. And then personally, I'm a headhunter, so basically I'm a recruiter. The COVID has kind of affected my business quite a bit. Maybe not as obvious.
What field are you in again?
So, I mean, basically automotive, medical devices, wireless technologies, that kind of stuff. So it's nice areas. So areas that I'm interested in are the areas that I work for. Because unless there's that interest, and there's very little motivation, right? So I've been doing that, but it's been really interesting. So you can say, obviously, oh, you know, COVID, nobody can do anything, but not really. It's much more subtle. So Japanese people tend to be quite negative, just culturally. The glass is always half empty, you know. And getting the candidate, the male side, the candidate to move is difficult, but it's possible. But the resistance comes from the wife, comes from the family. The wife will say, well, why are you moving during COVID? It's such a bad time to move. It's very risky, right? You know, because this risk always comes up in Japan society. I mean, the reason why they save so much of their salary is that they always feel that something is going to happen. And that really affects how their life is spent and how successful they are is the fear index. You know, so you'll talk to some people and they'll say, you know, I want to go, but my wife isn't very comfortable about moving now. I say, okay, no problem, it's all fine. So I always say, have you talked to your wife yet? Have you talked to your wife yet? It's the first question. And if the wife is okay, it's okay. You know, so we've been doing that. The second thing is that many of the international, I work with international companies in Japan. So many of the international companies in Japan assume that everywhere is the same, you know, as their home country.
Oh, of course, yes.
You know, I mean, you know, so America is the same as Japan, and when we put an advertisement on a company like LinkedIn, we'll get 1,000 people. You know, but in Japan, you put an advertisement on LinkedIn, you get 1. You know, it's just a very different culture where people are just not comfortable to apply. You know, they don't know anybody there, and you know, that kind of stuff, right? So then we have companies that assume that the candidate pools are still the same size. So they still have very high expectations, and they always want to see more candidates. But the fact of the matter is, the pools are much smaller because people are just simply not willing to move. But why would they? You know, they work from home. Life is easy. You know, they go into the office maybe once or twice a week or month. You know, the expectations of their workload is much less, you know, So why would they leave? You know, So obviously they leave because they've lost their job or because they're very unhappy. But generally, but the average person, life is not difficult now. You know, So there's no real reason.
So who's been hurt the most in your field, mostly?
So for me, initially, was automotive was disaster.
Okay.
Because if you think about a car, it's a very large purchase, and when people lose their confidence, the big things are things they stop buying first. You know, Like for example, in Japan, the local tourist industry has been actually quite good, and purchasing of, for example, of televisions and the smaller things have been really quite active. Because people are not going to America on holiday, people are not buying a new car, so they'll buy a new set of golf clubs.
Or a bike.
Right?
I've been seeing a lot of bikes.
You know,
And scooters.
So a lot of people don't want to go on the train anymore, so of course they'll buy scooters, they'll buy cheaper motorbikes, so they don't have to go on the train. You know, so these things are kind of obvious, you know, but even at the best of times, Japanese people don't generally like to spend their savings really. So I work with some of the large Japanese OEM motorbike companies, and the criticism is always, you know, why don't we have more sales in Japan? Because they're the 3rd richest country in the world. There's a lot of income, And I said, yeah, but the problem is there's not a lot of disposable income. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, they have a lot of money in the bank, but they're always worried that something bad will happen. So they really don't want to spend it. You know, yes. So even though they have lots of money, you think they'll, for example, in America or UK, you'll buy a second car, you'll buy a jacuzzi, you know, you'll have another motorbike or whatever. But in Japan, you'll just go and buy a golf club. You know, yeah. And even though they have a few million in the bank, they won't spend it. You know, yeah. It's just the mentality.
What do you think causes this reluctance? Because it seems to have been around Japan since the birth of Japan.
I mean,
what causes it?
If you think about, I mean, culturally, I mean, you know, if we go back, you know, related to the Second World War and other things going forward, but the issue is that in Japan, the people have never had to worry. So everything has been managed and controlled and cared for. So from being born to dying, you basically have mothers. You have your mother that takes care of you. You marry a Japanese lady, she's your mother. You join a big Japanese company, they're your mother. So there's very little reason to be concerned or to worry about anything. Even though they make a lot less money, they know that every month they will get money. You know, yeah. So I was talking with a really good friend of mine, a Japanese guy who's a president of a big company here. And we were saying that the reason why Japan succeeds, and even though salaries are very low, even though they've fallen behind many other countries, the reason why things are still good here is because expectation of a Japanese person is so low. You know, so for give you an example, if you, let's say, graduate from Harvard, which is maybe related to Tokyo University in Japan, you have a minimum expectation of your life. You know, you have an undergraduate, you have a master's degree, you want a house this big, you want a beautiful wife, you want 2 cars, a jacuzzi, a jet ski. You know, this is the expectation, and this is what you'll strive for. But in Japan, not at all. In Japan, you'll meet with a PhD guy who maybe programs satellites for, you know, Japan's space agency, and he makes 5 million yen a year. And I say to him, why you don't make much money? And he goes, no, I make the same as the other people in the company. Oh, okay. But don't you feel a little bit unhappy? You know, because you went to university, Todai, best university, PhD? No, not really. I did it because I wanted to study. I didn't do it because I thought I'd make more money. You know, yeah. And then he lives in a tiny little apartment, you know, yeah. And I say to him, don't you want a bigger apartment? No, it's big enough. How about, do you want a car? No, I live in Tokyo. There's subways and trains. Oh, okay. How about holidays? Yeah, I go maybe once a year, it's fine. You know, yeah. There's very little expectation. And that's, of course, a good and a bad thing. I mean, the good thing is that you have a satisfied population that doesn't really complain very much and can endure a lot of hardship. And the negative thing is they never push themselves. Because it doesn't matter how good you are, it goes by age. If you're 28 years old, you get paid 5 million yen. If you're 30 years old, you get 6 million yen. It doesn't really matter if you're brilliant or not, if you work harder or not. Everything is very average here. You know, yeah, and they realize that there's no real reason to push or to pull. That's the way it is.
That's very interesting. Because the thing I've thought about, the risk part you were talking about, a lot of that I think is because of the type of real estate they have. Earthquakes, typhoons, tsunami.
Right.
And then they're always worried if there's an earthquake, the next big fear is the fires.
Right.
So I think that's one reason for this generational belief of having something and make sure you at least have 6 months worth.
Right.
To pay, because it's going to take that long for us to get out of this.
I think
that's some
in Japan, the key is predictability.
Okay.
So the key is they need to know, will it rain tomorrow? If it does, I will carry my umbrella. So anything that's uncertain is really uncomfortable for Japanese people in general.
True.
They don't have any control.
Right.
So how they kind of overcome that fear of control is to over-prepare.
Right.
Just in case. They do. You know, yeah. So Japanese people love predictability. Right. They want to know that what will happen. Right. There's no surprises. You know? Right. But of course, earthquakes are surprises.
They're always surprises.
They
and they happen often.
Yeah, for sure.
They happen often. And sometimes they're more devastating than others, but they expect that.
So the problem is when you basically are preparing things, you want predictability. Then what the side effect of predictability is habits. You know, yeah. So Japanese people generally have habits, and what I mean by habits is that they'll wake up at exactly the same time every day, eat exactly the same breakfast, take exactly the same train, have exactly the same job, come home exactly the same time. And some of the reason for that is that the job is so dissatisfying, so really very boring and very monotonous.
Predictable.
Yeah, right. So that the job, they get very little joy from the job. So they just want the job to go by, and then on the weekend they'll do something. So hence the habit is there's no requirement again for thinking. It's all very predictable. There's nothing unusual. There's no risks. If I go to work at this time, if I leave at this time, I'll get my salary every month, and that's good enough for me. So in other countries we look at jobs as being joyful, as being challenging, as being motivational, as giving you energy, giving you direction, giving you a challenge. But in Japan, jobs are not seen that way.
That's true.
So many companies try to hire people, they don't quite get it. They think, we'll give them more money, but they don't really want more money.
It doesn't matter.
That
won't change their
right.
behavior.
So the money is important for the wife to make sure that they have the same money every month, that their life doesn't change. But it's not necessary. So when you hire a person in Japan, you need to give them a story. Number one is you need to tell them why they're important. And secondly, you need to tell them, because they're important, why their life is very stable. And the third thing is that the company never fires people. People stay with the company for a very long time, so there's never any risk. And I think if you can sell more of a story based, telling them why they're important,
not the income.
The income to a degree is important.
But that much,
but
right.
Only because some Japanese. So, for example, I moved a gentleman recently from a very large Japanese company to a pretty large American company, and his only reason for leaving was he needed more money, and the only reason why he wanted more money was his children were going to go to university from next year.
That's the only
so
reason.
He had more cost, and he had got an Excel sheet out and decided that he didn't have enough. And that was the only reason. So I said to him, are you happy in your job? No. Have you been happy for a long time? No. Have you ever thought about leaving? Yeah, but it's just a little bit, difficult. I'm a little bit nervous. And I said to him, but wouldn't you like a better life? So I'm looking at it from my perspective, a better life.
You're right.
But for him, it's not. For him, he doesn't need to make double the money and work twice as much.
That's right.
This is kind of the area that we very often have is money is an easy way.
That's right.
But the new generations don't want to work. They'd rather work half the amount of time for half the money, and they'll be much more happy. And you'll ask a Japanese person, what don't you want? And they'll say, I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to come home at 11 o'clock every night drunk. I don't want to be sleeping every weekend. I don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that?
I'd rather work for half the money and have twice as much private time to do my hobbies. So this is a change, maybe not just in Japan, in other countries as well. So it's changing. So then how do you motivate a person if money no longer becomes important? So then you say, give them more time off, but COVID's given them more time off.
It sure has.
So how about, where do I work? Work from anywhere, but now they work from anywhere. So this is a real challenge for many companies, is how do you motivate a candidate now or an employee to join and to stay, when many of the traditional ways of encouraging them are now given.
We're given, right.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, how do you see foreigners that are here in Japan? What are their challenges for work, leisure, just the lifestyle? Because some of them come here expecting that big piece of the pie. And some of them come here and just want to enjoy Japan for Japan.
I think.
How do you see foreigners?
The key is you have to look at, there are basically 3 or 4 types of foreigners.
Tell me what they are.
So you have the one foreigner that will come here, for example, teaching English or something, and then will basically migrate into a different job. If they study Japanese, they'll go into a different kind of job. You have another one, which is of course the expat, which are the presidents and the CFOs and CEOs are brought over to Japan. That's a little bit less now, because in the old days it was very difficult to find that kind of high level of president or country manager that was able to kind of walk in the middle. But now there's a lot of very capable Japanese people that really can be great presidents. So that's a little bit less. But European countries, Germany, Austria, France, culturally they're very rigid. So they tend to hire their own people because they want that culture to be everywhere, So that's the second person. And then the third person, I mean, basically, it's a person that came over to study in university,
Okay.
be it a Monbouchot scholarship, or other things where they've done master's degrees and PhDs, and invariably they'll stay here. They'll stay. And then the fourth person is a person that comes through just as a means to an end. They're basically traveling around Asia, they come to Japan, they're teaching English for a year, they save up money and they go. It's okay, no problem at all. They have no intention to stay here, and it's just a step, So if you kind of break those down, so in a Japanese company, so I have a very good friend of mine, he's an Italian guy, he works in the automotive industry. He was working for an American company and joined a very large Japanese automotive company, but was very frustrated. And I wanted to understand, well, what was the main problem? He said, there's very little skill and very little imagination in this very large and famous Japanese company. And the only reason why they succeed is they have more people. So he said, in another company, you have 10 people working on a project. In Japan, you'll have 100. Mm-hmm. He said, so it's not that they're better. It's just that they have economies of scale. They have so many people on the same kind of thing. So he joined the company, he was in the 6 months and left, But if you're more flexible and more Japanese and love the Japanese culture, then working in a Japanese company is no problem. And this relates, I think, a lot to the Asian people in general, be it Chinese, be it Korean, be it Vietnamese, be it whatever. They tend to fit in reasonably well, but they tend to do lower level jobs, because a lot of Japanese don't really want to do that. And then you have the really smart guys, guys who went to university here, and they inevitably will join a Japanese company first and then move to a foreign company within a couple of years, because they want to learn the business, understand things, get a relationship, and then they realize that they're not going anywhere because, overseas you work hard, you're promoted. In Japan, you're not. In Japan, you're promoted because you become 40. Not because you're brilliant.
And because you're Japanese.
Right, so there's a lot of frustration there. So then they're dealt with exactly right. And there's a lot of glass ceilings, but that's the same everywhere.
That's true.
But so then they'll realize they can't really go anywhere. Their career is basically moving ahead too slowly. And so they'll join the foreign companies. And they're quite dynamic. They understand the Japanese side, they understand the foreign side. And they really are the power people. Because they understand the balance. If I do this, this will happen. The relationship. But in Japan, if you do this, nothing really happens. There's no expectation that there'll be some kind of a connection between the action and the outcome. Because everything is very normal and it's big teams and no one person is special. But when you're a foreign guy, you work in a foreign company, if you do a great job, it's recognized. You get a higher salary, you get promotion a lot faster, so there's a lot more motivation. But there are a lot of Japanese now becoming like that. Mm-hmm. People that worked overseas, or people that maybe went to an overseas university, or people that have been in an international environment, they kind of get it. Right. But there's still not enough. But the problem is America and Europe assumes that they are this way.
Right.
They're not.
They don't.
They're not, So I think the expectations need to be managed.
Those examples you just made, I know a couple of people that have done that. I know the story of one surgeon who was living in France.
Right.
Japanese.
Right.
Came back here, thought he was going to revolutionize the industry.
Yeah. He's
now basically attending. He's like an apartment manager.
Yeah,
because they won't give him a job. They won't let him into the society.
Yeah, same. I mean, we had a nanny for a very short period of time, and she was a lady from Poland, and she was a pediatrician, fully qualified pediatrician, brilliant woman, went to the top university in Poland, and she was a nanny here because she couldn't work.
They wouldn't let her in.
They wouldn't allow.
But this was a Japanese guy.
He
was informed.
Did he have a Japanese license as well?
Wow. He was here, and they wouldn't. He could not get in because he kept on sticking up. He was that nail that kept on saying, "But let's do this. Let's try." And the group said no.
So I remember talking
really frustrating,
to in Tokyo American Club, a gentleman, a Japanese president of a very large company, and I sat down with him, and it was a really good conversation. He's a lovely fella, and but it changed quite quickly. So I said, "You're very lucky." Why am I lucky? Oh, because there's a lot more Japanese, people now that have studied overseas. They've come back, and they're a bit more dynamic. Oh no, never hire them. Why won't you hire them? Oh, they expect too much.
And they also have an attitude.
Right, and I said, but isn't that what you want? He said, oh, no, not at all. We have 98% of our population is the same.
That's right.
And I don't want them to think. I just basically want them to do things. And I said, well, that's okay if you look at Japan as its own little ecosystem. I said, but if you think about internationally, and international trade for you is very important, you have to think differently. But refuses. No, I don't agree. I don't agree.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going, okay.
But they look at their country and say, Neil, we live in a society right now that I was just telling someone the other day that just came back and he's now in quarantine.
Right.
He went to the U.S., came back, and the U.S. isn't really a good example because I talked to one guy in Kobe who happens to be from Prague or something.
Right.
And I said, I'm from the USA. And he said, oh, you mean you're from the USSA?
Ah.
And I went,
What's
you know,
that
you're
about?
probably right. You're probably right. Because I
Sure.
went there and you see all these people that are truly homeless,
Sure.
all these beautiful communities
Sure.
around all these homeless people in between.
Sure.
Everywhere.
Sure.
It's not confined to the big cities.
Sure.
And you think, wait just a minute. And the infrastructure just is not there.
Sure.
Then you come here, and I think Japan, outside of any other country on the planet,
Sure.
for a big city, everything works. The people are
Yeah.
conditioned
Yes.
in a certain way. You go into public toilets,
Sure.
which you can't do anywhere else,
Yeah.
and they're clean.
Immaculate. 7-Eleven,
They're
immaculate.
Clean.
Yeah,
You
McDonald's.
can't go to a good hotel
Yeah.
in some of the countries
I agree.
and find a toilet
Yeah.
as clean as here.
Yeah.
And that says a lot
Yeah,
about
yeah.
our country.
I agree.
I think they find themselves, because of that risk, unwillingness to take risk, that they clean up real quick. And they keep things clean because they're ready to.
Right.
That's like Kobe, a year
Sure,
after
sure,
the
sure,
Kobe
sure.
earthquake. Who would know?
Sure. I had
They
a
had freeways turned
conversation
out,
with
so
my
it's
daughter
interesting.
today in the car, and we were talking about general democracy is a wonderful thing, but the danger is you give a lot of people a lot of power to make decisions that they're not really able to
Too
make.
much.
Right?
Too much.
So I said to my daughter, I said, look, the great thing about Japan is you have a very, very large middle class, a massive middle class. And I said homelessness in other countries may be related to drugs or maybe related to family issues and stuff, but in Japan it really isn't. In Japan, homelessness here, a lot of people are much, much older. And then my daughter asked, well, why are they older? I said, well, the biggest problem was during the bubble, many, many people migrated from the countryside, came to Japan to build many of these buildings and infrastructure and stuff. The bubble popped quite quickly, but there was no work back home, so they tended to stay in Japan. And Japan's
In
got
Tokyo, you mean?
In Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
But they have some really bizarre rules, like you're not allowed to rent an apartment if you're over a certain age.
Things like that, right.
So that's one of the reasons why you always have kids, not because you love them or want them, it's because they'll take care of you. And then as a gift for that is when you die, they get the house. So it's really quite a logical and not really a loving relationship by any means, but it's a very logical way of doing it. So you see many, many homeless people that really are in quite a tough situation. They would work, but they need an address. They don't have an address, they can't work. So, and the social system in Japan is okay, but the biggest issue with Japan is that they tend to ignore. You'll say to somebody, "Wow, did you see all the homeless people on the river?" "Oh, I didn't see anybody."
No.
Okay. So I know some people that are disadvantaged and homeless people. There's one particular gentleman that I cycle past sometimes. I'm just so sorry for him. So I buy him food every time I go by. I bought him clothing and waterproof jacket and sleeping bag and socks. And I said to my daughter, "But why? Why do you do that?" And I said, "Well," he said, "but maybe he doesn't need it." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But it's okay. If I give the 10 people and 2 people needed it, it's enough. It's okay." I said, "Of course there are people, that will take advantage of the social system. I mean, and very often they're quite obvious." I said, "But as a society, the hope is that you're helping them, so if you need help, they'll help you." This is kind of the way I think, So, and also selfishly, it makes me feel happy.
That's true.
When I do something good, it's just as much for me. As it is for them.
Right.
So we were talking about, I said in Japan, you have an amazing social system where you have a massive middle class and basically I said, but there is limitations. I mean, like in UK, you can claim unemployment benefit for many years, but in Japan, 3 to 6 months and it stops.
That's right.
Right. You have to be, willing to try and find a job and stuff. So Japan they care for each other and they don't. You think, oh, Japan's such a caring side. It really isn't. I mean, neighbors never talk to each other. Neighbors never even speak to each other, never help each other. Families do. Maybe countryside is different, but in Tokyo,
it's different. Countryside is different.
Yeah.
And they do speak because there's fewer people and they know each other.
Yeah.
But it's a little different. It's different, but it's built on a whole different system. And, and it's an island mentality, too, even though we don't think of it as an island.
Sure.
It's still an island.
Absolutely.
And I just find for foreigners, for you and I, expats particularly, and ones that have learned to enjoy this country, I was happy the Olympics didn't happen.
Yep.
Right. I was happy it didn't happen. I didn't want to have these foreigners come here and think they could live here and create 4 years of havoc
Right.
of trying to stay here afterwards,
Sure,
and
sure,
realizing that
sure.
everything they tried for, no matter how much
Sure.
money they threw to it,
Right.
didn't work.
Right.
Then, when they leave, and after all of the stuff they leave and the bitterness
Sure.
they spew out, you and I have to
Right.
deal with that.
Sure.
Everyone that sees
Sure.
us when we ride our bikes is going to think we're one of those guy jeans.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But they didn't come, so it's been
Right.
peaceful for us.
Right.
They still like us, the people.
Sure.
we met
But the sad thing is,
Oh.
I remember the Winter Olympics, I think in Hakuba many years ago.
Okay.
And I remember the government encouraged many of the local businesses to expand, to build new rooms, and they all did that. They got many loans, and the reality was there was very little business after the Olympics, and so a lot of the local people were really in a lot of trouble, a lot of hardship. And also with the Olympics, many shops were open, many hotels were done, but rightfully so. I mean, that was okay because the Rugby World Cup was an incredible success,
That was
and
beautiful.
I loved it, absolutely adored
did
it.
I.
It was so good,
So good, wasn't it?
yeah. And I loved that, and I was thinking, oh, maybe the Olympics might be like that.
Everyone did.
So that kind of came through. So yeah, so I think it was managed well in a very difficult time. I think the bigger challenge now is China with the Winter Olympics.
That's right.
I'm not really, with so many people testing positive, I don't know how it's going to work.
So what do you think is going to happen with this COVID thing? How are you looking at this in the big scale?
I
Are we going to get out of it, Neil?
Oh, no,
Or going to
never.
continue?
It'll be here for, it'll be
This
a
is
flu.
really, truly
It'll
the
be a
new
flu. Yeah, like now we have,
normal. We're always going to have masks.
Well, in Japan they always make you wear a mask anyway.
Anyway.
No, it won't be a mask. So what's going to happen is that it's going to become just like a flu. It's going to be pandemic. It's going to be endemic, right? So basically, it'll be a lot less severe because we got a lot more antibodies. We have vaccinations, whatever that might be.
Okay.
I mean, I think lifestyles will forever changed. I think people won't travel as much. People won't go out as much. I think that's just the new norm. So the businesses have to change the way they do things.
Okay.
But that's okay. I mean, change is not a bad thing. And to be honest with you, in the old days of flying to Europe for one day for a meeting, flying back was ridiculous. So now it can be done by Zoom or other things like that.
Right.
So it's going to be with us for a long time. And well, I don't think we'll ever really be comfortable. So many of the very, very large gatherings of people, a lot of people won't be comfortable to go there. I mean, but to be honest with you, I mean, you have certain seasons now. So you have your flu jab, and it can be one of 2 or 3 different flus, and you're not really too sure. And very often the jab you get is not the one you need because they bought it a year before. That's okay. And you might find the same thing with a COVID-based illness where you'll have a COVID jab once a year.
Do you have any intentions of leaving Japan?
So I mean, my work is here. And everything. So I'm going to leave Japan to take my daughter to university in the summer in UK. We'll go over there for 1 or 2 months and stuff. So that's really it. Traveling, we don't travel as much. I mean, obviously, because it's such a pain when you come back into Japan. But it's nothing like Hong Kong. Hong Kong, like 3 weeks.
It's 3 weeks in Hong Kong.
2 or 3
but
weeks.
Australia, I don't think you can even get into Australia.
Yeah, New Zealand can't get in either.
You can't get in.
And also, if you're a New Zealand citizen, you can't get in.
You can't get in, right? If you left,
yeah.
sorry about that.
So I mean, So I'm okay with the COVID thing. I'm sorry, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think vaccinations, I mean, it's not, you understand the vaccination is not really, it doesn't have to be just for you. It's also
for the people
around you.
Right,
that's just kind of the way it works. And people say masks don't really work. Well, it's okay. It just makes people feel comfortable.
That's right.
It's like an airbag in a car. It's like a seat bag in a car. It's like wearing a helmet on a bicycle. It's just the way it is.
That's right.
Okay, so there's no reason to fight against it. It doesn't kill you. It's okay. So, but the thing is, I mean, some of the things I don't see any point to, for example, is now with COVID being everywhere, testing is kind of pointless. So the money spent on testing should be spent on other things.
But don't you think, for example, before they just had this most recent outbreak, just before the elections, I think it was something like 6,000, then it dropped down to 60 or something?
Sure.
Wasn't that because people just said, look, I don't want to be quarantined.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm not going to, so they followed Trump's advice.
Sure.
If you stop testing, you won't have so many.
But I mean, to be really, really honest with you, I mean, so initially, where it's just beginning, testing is absolutely essential, But once it's in a country, and it really doesn't accomplish anything, right? So this is kind of the important thing, is that there are phases in every disease or every epidemic that need to be adhered to very strictly. But as soon as it's become a pandemic where many people have it, and many people will have it because it's basically impossible to avoid, You know, yeah. I mean, the only good thing about testing is it slows down the number of people being found to be positive.
Okay.
But the problem with Omicron now is that even though it doesn't have anywhere near the serious side effects,
It doesn't.
many people are not able to go to work. So many doctors and nurses and bus drivers and policemen are basically not allowed to go to work. So
Because they have
yeah,
Omicron,
because they
but
have it, right?
They have it, but
even though they're not
Right,
being affected, and this is having a massive impact socially, right? So
because
you
that's
know,
just the new rules we've set up.
Yes,
and
yes,
the thing
yes.
is, we didn't do that with flus
Sure.
in the past.
Sure,
we
sure,
didn't do
sure.
that with anything else.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a cold. They said this is
Yeah.
similar to a cold.
yeah, same as
Right
SARS and MERS and,
And AIDS.
Yeah, yeah.
People weren't locked up.
Sure.
They weren't put into, they're
Right.
just told to restrict what you're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But
So
when
why-
you're a politician, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
But what's behind this? I mean, is there anything behind it, or do you think it's just the way
It's just political. It's just
has
politicians
nothing to be
being
tied
politicians.
to? I'm throwing up a few things. It doesn't have anything to do with the wealthy. It doesn't have anything to do with the new currency. It doesn't have anything to do with, because we have, now everyone's going into cryptocurrency
Yeah,
and the NFTs,
sure.
which is going to be this new virtual
Sure.
worlds, the meta world.
I mean,
It has nothing to do with
again,
this?
there's two kinds of people. Person that is happy to conform, and another person that resists it.
Okay.
It's just the way you're built.
I think it is regardless of how you.
I mean, I don't really think it's a wealth thing so much.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the COVID and stuff, it affects people with money, without money. In the earlier stages, maybe if you're more wealthy, you can get better medical care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in America, there's no national health service, right?
There's none.
So this is the weakness of America, is that if there's any possibility that the person would have to pay, then they would never go to the hospital.
Right.
So this is kind of an issue, from my perspective. And this is kind of the American way, where sometimes I really wonder how America works. And I've come to the conclusion that everybody believes that there's a chance of becoming wealthy. There's a chance of being successful. And so they're willing to endure really
Harsh
really
conditions.
terrible things, because they still have a dream that they can
Well,
make
they've
it.
been told that all the
Right,
time, because
right.
the person gets to this
Sure.
says, my baby was,
Sure.
born with a cleft foot,
Right,
and,
right,
and and I had no money. My husband beat me every day,
Right,
and
right.
now I'm a millionaire.
Yeah. So
you keep on hearing those
I have
stories.
a friend who lives in Seattle, and he said that it's absolutely disastrous there now.
It's disastrous
just,
all over the U.S. California,
so-
more so, I think,
Right.
in the places like Florida, because
Sure.
they can live outside
Right,
easier.
Right.
But in the other countries, after a winter or so, they're done.
Yeah.
They say, well, clean that up real
Yeah,
good.
I agree.
They're
So I
done.
mean, it's just that again. I mean, so I talked to a very good friend of mine again in America, and he said, like, why should I give any of the money I make to help somebody? Why? They can help themselves. Why would I have to pay more tax for national health? Why? Why doesn't he just go and work? I said, I understand that completely. I said, but the way that cultures and society works
He's taught I'm by me.
is you need to. There's the weak, and there's the strong, and there's
There's a society,
you know,
there's a group.
But I mean, so it's just different. A different way of thinking. I
Mentality.
think.
Yeah. I find the U.S., when I go there, I feel fearful when I'm in the U.S.
Sure.
And I think most people that go there, I don't care who they are,
Sure.
they have that sense of fear, because they know it's like going into uncharted waters when you know that there could always be a shark there with a gun, and be willing to use it.
Sure.
And he may not be an adult.
Sure. Oh, no, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if you're in an environment like that,
Sure.
you know that is
Sure.
the rule.
Yeah. So my one rule with the universities for my daughter was that she was not allowed to apply to American universities. So we looked at Canada, and we so.
But even Canada's...
I know, but it's nowhere near as
I know that. But who can be anywhere
Right,
near that?
I know.
But it spills over to that.
Sure. So we decided, like, the culture of America is a very unique culture, and my biggest fear is that people are so emotional about everything, and very often quite violently so. And I never understand how it can be so clear, so polarizing. You're this or you're that.
Or else.
You're massive or you're small. You're tall or you're short. There's nothing in the middle in America. It's always you're one or the other. And this, for me, is very confusing to me. You're either rich or you're poor. I mean, you're overweight or you're underweight. I mean, I just don't understand why there has to always be someone, because there's so many incremental points along those two poles, right? And I don't understand why it has to be that way. Why, if it's politics, Democrat, Republicans, why do they have to be so polar? I don't, because many of them, there's many common policies and common, hopes and ambitions for, society. So I don't understand why. Why is it so polarizing?
It sells, it brings attention. I think America's the biggest selling agency in the world.
Sure.
They know how to market.
Sure.
They've done that in the
Sure.
media and everything else.
Sure.
So they know that nobody likes average.
Sure.
No one does.
Right.
But you've got to have
Right.
the good and the bad, and they keep on using those two.
But this is the
Star
this
Wars.
This is the expectation problem again, right?
Right.
Is that when you have an expectation, it has two outcomes: happiness or unhappiness. Simple. So if you have an expectation that you need to have a life just like your neighbor, if your neighbor has another car, you deserve another car. So if you have this expectation, what it means is you're just very unhappy a lot of the time. You're buying things you can't afford, you're living places you shouldn't be living, you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. So I truly believe in America there's so much unhappiness.
You know why, too?
You
I took my son through a tour, my third son, the one that did get married, and we went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And when we got to California, he started talking the way that you did. You're talking right now about how unhappy everyone is. I said, let me ask you a question, Lonnie. Have you really paid attention to what you see every time you're watching television here? They said, no. I said, let's turn it on right now. And we did. And I said, let's not watch the shows so much. Let's watch the commercials.
Sure.
Every commercial. Sexy, the girls in nice, tight butt, this and that.
Sure.
Or you have bad breath, or underarms bad, or you have a dimple, this and that.
For sure.
Your teeth aren't bright enough.
Sure.
You're never good enough.
Right.
There's something. And you got to take this, or this to get there.
Sure.
So you go to bed thinking, do I have folding skin under my neck?
Right.
Because they just got through telling you. That's all you hear all the time. Now, then you have the shows that dramatize this.
Sure.
You have the police stories. You have the doctor stories.
Yeah.
You have everything
Sure.
that add to all this commercialization.
Sure.
You have, yet in Japan, what kind of commercials you have? Oh, Sheena, and this and that. They're not telling you how bad you are.
They're so happy.
They're always happy. And then you look at what backs it up.
Sure.
Look at how beautiful Mount Fuji.
Yeah,
we see Mount Fuji every day, but it's beautiful. And look at the sakura. Every year, same sakura. And they take a meal, and it could be curry rice and
everybody is so happy. You have cooking shows, you have travel shows, right?
So you go to that job.
Sure. But this is the way it was in America in the 60s
in the 50s,
70s.
no,
right?
50s.
50s. It was just
60s.
like that, right?
That's how it was. Everyone was happy. Everyone had
Sure.
two-car garage.
So why did it change?
It was nice because it doesn't sell.
Sure.
You get to a certain thing, it doesn't sell.
Right.
But Europe didn't change.
Yep.
Because they're old history.
Sure. So again, we were talking to my daughter, saying isn't it amazing? My wife will ask a question when we're watching a movie, and I'll just go on the internet and find the answer. Well, when was the first Top Gun movie out? Oh, it must have been 40 years ago. No way, it wasn't 40 years ago. Oh no, 36 years ago. I can find it immediately. I say to my daughter, you're very lucky, because when I was in university, we go to the library at 11 o'clock at night for the one book, and that one book was out. Right, I said, but now you can just do everything. I said, but the danger for you now is not information, is it real or not?
Or knowing what to look for. And know what to ask. They don't know. They're not taught what to look for.
Sure.
It's beneficial for you and I.
Yes.
You know why? Because we had the analog.
Sure.
And we know how to turn a screwdriver.
Right.
Because even if they see it on YouTube, they have no concept
Right.
of what they're looking at. You and I do.
Right.
That's why I say our children represent our past, not our future.
Sure. But I also believe that hardship is absolutely essential.
For anything. If you don't fail, you will never succeed.
Because when I in my job, I tend to hire people that will be older, who have families, because they've been through something. And then when things are good, they know it's good because they've compared it to something else. And when things are bad, they think, well, it wasn't as bad as before. When I hire a younger person, they believe everything should be given to them, that they're entitled to everything. And then when something bad happens, it's cataclysmically bad. And when something good happens, why wouldn't it be that way? So I said, you know how lucky you are? I don't feel lucky. I said, you're kidding me, right? I said, when I first started recruiting, we didn't have emails. We do fax machines. We wait by the fax machine for the offer to come, and
you
we'd
had
be
to
on the
mail
telephone.
things, and you had to mail to people.
Yeah, we didn't have portable. I sound like an old man now, so I'm my father. But it's true. I mean, this is the way it was. So everything I see now, it's like, oh, this is really good. This is cool because I understand.
But you have something to compare it with.
Yeah, I understand why it's there. I understand why it was invented. But here it's just like, well, what's a fax machine? I said, let me explain to you. When I was in university, was when they first brought the fax machine out, and the monumental event was it became legal to send the document via fax.
That's right.
This was the key turning point for data, where you didn't have to have a solid. I said, so understand that now you take it for granted.
Now let me ask you this, Neil. Does your daughter have any of those problems?
So my daughter doesn't follow any social media at all. She has no Facebook. Because she doesn't like it. For her, it's just so annoying and so stressful.
But you know why it's probably so annoying, so stressful? Because she has a father that's planted those seeds
Sure.
of knowledge in her head to
Sure.
make her start thinking about what
Yeah,
she's actually absorbing,
she's
what
a
she's paying
very-
attention to.
She's a very smart girl.
Right.
She's
I'll go as far as to say
yeah.
father and mother.
But she's a very smart girl, and I let her. So I'm a firm believer that I want to help my daughter. So what that means is I don't take away anything from her. I basically give her choices. And I want her to make the decisions, because ultimately she's the one that will live with them. If she makes a mistake, then I'll step in and put another point of view. So, for example, the university, she was struggling because she didn't have a focus. She didn't really know. So she knows she loves science. So she's biology, mathematics, and chemistry. Mm-hmm. This is what she's chose. So she's already chosen kind of a field. But what field? Medicine, engineering, she didn't know. And she was thinking incredibly emotionally. Oh, I love psychology. It's such a cool area. I said, but it's not, you can't make that much money doing it. It's kind of a hard thing to do. And then she said, oh, I want to become a plastic surgeon. I said, fantastic, make loads of money. I said, but realistically, you have to have 10 years under the belt of medicine. You'll do your 6 years or so of regular schooling, then you'll go into hospital, then you'll specialize. I said, so realistically, before you become a plastic surgeon, it's 10 years of your life. Are you willing to spend 10 years of your life, and does dad have enough money to pay for you for 10 years?
10 years.
So this is when I kind of stepped in and gave her a few different kind of ideas. Mm-hmm. But I never told her what to do and what not to do. Mm-hmm. Japanese mothers tend to be a lot more direct. They believe that their daughter is the way they are because of them, because they woke them up every morning. And I believe, so I said to my daughter, I said, Mum and Dad love you tremendously, but, Mum, I trust you 100%, Mum doesn't. I said, but it's okay. So Mum believes that she has to step in and make sure you're okay. And I believe that you'll make the right decision, given a little prod here and there, but ultimately you'll figure it out. I said, this is a European way of thinking, and this is a Japanese way of thinking. It's okay.
But it's also a male way of thinking and a female way of thinking.
Maybe.
Because what you're saying to me is this: you're not a female, so there's a lot of stuff you're going to tell your daughter, you're going to figure it out, because you could never figure it out.
Right.
Now, if she were a boy,
Sure.
your wife would be saying,
Right.
he's going to let him figure it out, Neil. You say, no.
No.
Hit him upside the head. Let him
Hard
figure
life.
that out.
Yeah, it's the way it was.
You say, that's what happened to me.
Sure.
That's why he's going to turn
Yeah.
out to be no better than me or just as good as me.
Exactly.
Up to that.
Yeah.
Listen, what kind of advice can you leave us with
Sure.
that you want to wrap this up with? I mean, about your daughter, or about the COVID situation, about recruiting, about the next time you're going to come on the podcast?
I mean, like, I believe that everyone needs to be responsible. I hate the way that these days there's escapes from everything. You're overweight, but you take this pill, you become thin. You're doing a bad thing, but if you do this, it'll be okay. I hate those easy fixes. I don't believe there's any such thing as an easy fix, because very often fixes come from yourself. That's my first thing. Second thing is, please take responsibility. I say to my daughter, I said, everything you do has an effect on you and has an effect on other people. So you need to view it from those perspectives always. It's like I went to a restaurant. There was a Japanese family. The kids were running around making lots of noise. I got very angry. I said to the family, this is your responsibility. What your kids do at home, I don't care. But in the restaurant, they act properly. If they don't, please leave. You
This
know,
was at a Japanese restaurant?
just a regular Japanese family restaurant, you know, yeah. And sure enough, the
They
kids stopped.
sure did. I bet you
know,
they
yeah.
did.
And I'm thinking that everybody else in a restaurant was thinking this, but nobody ever said it.
No, they won't.
Because they didn't know whether they should, and they were not sure,
That's not
you know,
what you do,
right.
yeah.
But this was kind of my job. So the third thing is like, it's not going to be a wonderful life. There's going to be really wonderful times and then really terrible times. And just if you manage your expectations and just do the best you can, it's good enough. It's okay. You know, it's okay, you know, yeah. And as you get older, friends become more important.
Isn't it?
Because when you're younger, you're invincible. But when you get older, you realize the people around you make a big difference. So that's when she gets older, you know, yeah. So that's it. That's the advice I have.
Neil, thank you so much, man.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
I always
Thanks so much.
appreciate this, man.
Thank you so much.
I always appreciate this.
Sure.
All of you watching this podcast, remember to press like, subscribe. Never forget, it's all on loan. Continue to reach for the stars, and you're too blessed to be stressed.